Hello and welcome to our conversation today. Welcome and to joining our conversation today with Donald and myself. We will be beginning quite shortly, but in the meantime, whilst we wait for as many people as we can to join us, I always imagine people virtually running from one meeting session to another. Not quite like the old days, is it, Don? Where you'd be running the length of a building with your paper or your file of facts under your arm.
Well, I remember actually in the 1990s working for Oxford Computer Training, and we'd get the train down from Oxford to Paddington, and we had an office in Paddington where we did computer training, and we'd literally get off the train with the computers, and these are not computers with flat screens. These are big cathode, exactly.
Yeah.
And you had two of those, one on each shoulder, and somebody else was carrying. Between the three of you, you got 6 computers into the space, and you sat up. So yes, a lot easier these days. Young folk, they don't know they're born. That's what I say, David.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, people just don't know they're born today. But thank you for joining us. But before I get into the housekeeping, I'm sure that as you find us, you'll be able to find your way to the attendee chat. And while you're there, I know it's the normal thing, but you say who you are and where you're from. But why don't you tell us your name and something that was common in the place of work when you began working that perhaps is rarer now? As Donald's just said, running with a giant computer is perhaps gonna take the plaudits for that one.
I like Marty's got one which I think we all can recognise. Walking around the office with a folder in your hands, looking busy. Yeah, classic.
Yeah,
obviously seasoned office worker, Marty there. Very
seasoned, exactly.
CD-ROM.
CD-ROM, classic. Wow. Right, okay. You fill in the chat, and I'll do the housekeeping. So the platform itself, not many of you could be familiar with On24. It's a fabulous piece of technology on your side with lots of different engagement tools, including emojis. You've seen the chat. You're able to maneuver things around and make us smaller and the chat bigger. When the slides come on, you'll be able to increase the size of the screen so that you can get into the detail. So everything's resizable and removable. There's a distinction I'd like to make between the chat and the questions. By all means, fill up the chat amongst yourselves, give us your questions, comments, heckles. I know that Don's got some questions that he'll be posing if you pop your responses in there, but it would really help us out if you've got a question you'd like to contribute to the conversation. If you pop that in the Q&A, then we can make sure that we can find those rather than being lost in the chat. Resources, you'll see that there is a section called resources where you'll find these slides, you'll find additional materials and links to the Global Sentiment Survey itself. So feel free to download those at any time. And there's always one or two people who might be facing technical tips, but if it seems everyone's hearing us, but you're not, then check your speakers on there. And it might be a bandwidth issue, and sometimes other apps can eat up your bandwidth rather than helping you to concentrate on what we're talking about today. The recording of this will be sent to you, so we're recording it, and there'll be a follow-up email very, very shortly as well. But before we kick off the conversation here, and of course, I suppose the final reminder is that you're involved in this conversation. It's not just Don and I, but before we do that, I will hand over to Don Taylor, who will be able to give us some opening comments and remarks and kick off that conversation. Over to you, Don.
David, thank you so much. I am absolutely fascinated by the thoughts that are coming in on the chat, looking at the things that used to be common straight out the box was, of course, smoking. That was one of them. But also we've got OHPs, overhead projectors, floppy disks, very popular. Fiona is saying fax machines. When my wife started work in the 1980s, she remembers distinctly that you had to get the director's signature before you could send a fax, because that's how complicated they were. Chalk, Mary is saying, and Blackboard, goodness me, taking me all back here. And if you really want to feel old, Caitlin says, I've only been in the workforce for 5 years. I don't have an experience like that yet. I feel so old. But Caitlin, look around you, because at some point in 20 years' time, you'll be in this position and you'll be able to say, I remember when, ... We don't know what it is yet. Things change. Desk phones. I've got a desk phone on my desk, and I don't know why. It never rings, but I keep it there just in case. Great to have you all here and joining us with these thoughts. By the way, David, I'm not so familiar with On24. Are the slides live? I'm not even sure if they are. Yep.
They are live. Yeah, we're live.
Right. Let me kick off with some slides. And it's not really so much that we're presenting slides, so much as we're using some data from the Global Sentiment Survey to stimulate the conversation. I've got 5 questions set up between me, you, and David, and we're going to talk our way through them. At the end, we're going to get to the point of having a Q&A session. We don't know quite how long that will take. It depends really on how much conversation we have during the course of this. That's me, and that's the title, An Opinionated Take on the Global Sentiment Survey. I want to say thank you to 360 Learning and, of course, to all the other sponsors and the global media partners, because we have close to 4,000 people responding to the survey each year from over 100 countries. It's only possible because of the great work. And actually, 360 Learning did particularly good work getting people in to respond to the survey. If you responded, thank you very much. I'm going to start with a question for you. And I'd just like to, I'm going to take a sip of my tea. That's the question. What excites you about learning and development right now, and what worries you? So this is all about the sentiment of where we are, how you're feeling about it. Just drop your answers into the chat, please. I'm going to have a sip of tea. David, don't say anything for the moment. Let's just wait and see what people have to share. There's always that quiet moment when nothing happens, and then the chat will start to fill up. What's exciting you? What's worrying you? Let us know in the attendee chat, please. I'm laughing because Joe and Kristen have both said what we're expecting, which is AI for both. And Mary says keeping up with AI. Shannon says AI. Margaret says AI. Paul is excited by more common conversations about L&D delivering impact rather than courses. And I think that's a really fair point. The idea that the conversation does seem to have shifted, and that's a good thing. AI can be a new modality. And AI at the center, Becky says, to make life easier. Is this what you're expecting, David? You've seen the slides before. Are these the answers you're expecting?
Yeah. I think so. I think that we experience very similar dynamics inside our organisations, and can anticipate. I think the context means that we'll feel it slightly differently. But yeah, I think that AI being the sun and the cloud at the same time, you can see how. What about you, Don? You smiled there. You've done this a few times, so it must be similar.
I've asked this question before, and the first answer out of the blocks is always AI, because it does meet both of those criteria. And when you look at the results of the Global Sentiment Survey, it's quite clear that AI is both a stimulus for excitement and a cause for genuine concern, and rightly. But what I'm smiling at is the nuance and the general positivity of these answers. Also, we had 2 here together, which I think really sort of shows some of the issues around AI. So Fiona says, losing the humanness with AI conversations. Margaret says, increasing need for human connection excites me. And I think that's very interesting, that AI does have the potential to make things more bland at scale, but at the same time, it increases that need. So if we can find the way to meet the need and to help people be more human, then we're in a good place. Interestingly, David, the word human, I asked the question in the survey, and we'll come to this in a minute. Appear at all. This year, it appeared more than 60 times in the answers. And I think that goes to show the very real concern we've got about humanity. And I think it's 2 things. I think it's, as Fiona says, that feeling that humanness is part of what we do. I think there's also something else behind it, the sense that in our human and part of L&D, which AI runs the risk of taking away from us. And I think that's a real concern people have got. David, I can see myself. Can you see me? You don't seem to be moving at all. Oh dear.
Yeah, I can see you. I can see you. Are you? Can you hear me? Okay.
No.
No, I'm still here.
Everything froze for a minute. As long as people are still chatting, that's great.
Yep, I'm still here.
Yeah, I'm going to my phone as a internet provision.
But it is really interesting while you do that, Don. That I think that it could be a common comment in learning and development about the human side, but I think that there's something across the board. I think that there's something about connections, something about trust, and we're seeing that with marketing, the way that brands are communicating and connecting with employees as well. So I think that we're probably experiencing our own version of a general trend, and maybe it's a response to an over-index for technology going one way or another. I remember in my Disney days, and we were talking about AR and VR, and somebody from the digital team said we should never
underlining everything that we're talking about here, and so we're not talking explicitly about AI.
Okay, let's do a quick tech check. Can everybody say whether you can hear me, Don, or neither? What's going on? But let's. I think we need to do some diagnosis, if that's all right. Okay, so you can hear me. Brilliant. Okay. Well, while Don's connecting, I'm on the chat with Don on WhatsApp. So he'll come off. He'll do the magic, disappear and come back, and everything will be fine again. So as I was mentioning, the digital team at Disney said you should never over-index. We're not going to do one or the other. It's the augmentation. It is going to be how the two come together that is going to be how we'll capitalize on truly the digital age. So I think that's probably what we're experiencing here. That there is so much emphasis on AI, and not just within our profession, of course, but within the organizational ecosystems where there's so much conversation. And so it's fair to say that there was going to be some kind of reflection of that in the global sentiment survey. What do we got here going on? Switch it off and on again. Are you talking about Don or Andrew, or are you talking about the technology? So there's plenty. There's plenty within there that I think is worth scratching below the surface, and I think that when Don and I spoke on the podcast about the let's have a look. Don, we can't hear you yet. But when we're talking on the podcast, I think that the really interesting part is that there is so much data inside the Global Sentiment Survey beyond the headline, which of course the headline is oh no, AI's number one again. But it's so interesting that the data within that, and then of course Don will come back and he'll be able to share with us some of the ever presents within that top 10 that were moving around. Let's see, how are we getting on? How are we getting on? Adelaide, how are we doing with getting Don back? Okay, Adelaide. Adelaide, are you with you messaging Don on the? Let's have a look at the questions while we're doing this. So Analia, how to work with a lack of attention from our audience on live learning sessions. Wow, I think that Don will be your man there. But I see we've got Andrew Jacobs in the session here today, and I'd love to know what Andrew's thoughts are, because I know that you do a lot of work with online learning, Andrew. And but do you know how cheeky of me to be asking you to do that when you're not on the payroll today. Here you were, putting your feet up, hoping to enjoy this, but I hope you don't mind answering, giving your thoughts there to Analia on how to work with the lack of attention from our audience on live learning sessions. Relevance is here comes Andrew. Hopefully the long version is coming. Relevance is going to be a key to that, I'm sure. But Andrew will certainly be able to help there. Oh, have we got Don? You're here. I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Am I there?
You are here. You are here.
Honestly, technology. I'm very sorry about that, everybody. Of course, we do a technological check. Of course, we get online beforehand. Of course, we have backup systems, and nonetheless, things still manage to throw a spanner in the works. David, I'm sure you've done an admirable job covering everything while I've been in limbo. I'm going to just press on if that's all right, because I think I'd love to get people's feedback on a couple of things, and there is a couple of questions I really want to get people's thoughts on. Thank you very much for holding the fort while I was temporarily away there. Okay, so here's the report, sponsored by 360 Learning, and you've probably seen this stuff before. We covered three things, the three main questions. What's hot? What's your biggest challenge? Fifth year we've run that. What have you done that's new this year? First time we've run that. That is super interesting. That's going to be a permanent feature in the future. 13th year of the survey, and we cover more than 100 countries, nearly 4,000 people. So it's quite a big data sample. We ask people in the big question, what's hot next year, to choose up to three of these things. All right. Most people, 95% of people, choose three things. And the results, you may well have seen this already because it's been populated on LinkedIn and so on. These are the results. And what I want to do, though, with David's help, is really drill down on these results and unpick them a bit. I caught David earlier saying on the podcast together, we had this conversation about all the data that exists behind this table that really makes you think about what's really going on. That's what I want to unpick in the next half an hour together. So the first thing is, okay. And by the way, on this table, we see the number, we see the option, artificial intelligence, in brackets, a 1. That means it was number 1 last year. The share of votes is 22.5%, but bear in mind that you can vote up to 3 times. So actually that means that something like 3 times that number of people voted. So between 65 and 70% of people chose artificial intelligence as their thing that was hot this year. The little red arrow, what does that mean? Well, that means that actually interest in artificial intelligence, the vote for it fell this year. It only fell by 0.1%, but thank goodness it did fall, because I was getting very bored of seeing AI being at the top of the table. that's one thing. I want to look at the second thing that really struck me, and then I'm going to come back to the third thing. So the second thing that really struck me, and David, let's drill down on this together. And I want to get everybody's view on this. Interest in showing value was up from 7th position last year to number 5th this year. What does that mean? Well, let's have a look at how the options work on this and what that jump means, because this is just 1 year, but let's have a look at 10 years of responses from the survey. So personalization as an option has been on the table for 10 years. And you can see here it's done exactly what things normally do, which is they start with people being excited and they fall away because people get used to them and it's a bit boring. Personalization. So that's come down 7 years in a row till 2023. And what happens then? Well, ChatGPT comes out at the end of 2022. 2023, we get the 2023 survey is from the end of 2022, but the 2024 survey is from the end of 2023. And at that point, everyone's interested in AI and they think, personalization is something we can use AI for. This never happens. It never happens that something goes down and then comes up 3 years in a row. That's something special. It means that that personalization is riding on the coattails of the popularity of AI. Now, value is similar, but different. Value has always stayed, showing value has always stayed between about 5.5% and 6.5%, bounces between them, but not this year. Look at that. This year, it's broken out of those boundaries, and it's the highest point ever that it's been on the survey. So this is where, David, I could take a stop for a second. I want to ask you, and I want to ask everybody in the room, what do you think is happening here? Why is this so important to people, showing value right now? David, give us your thoughts quickly. Everybody in the room, please drop your thoughts into the chat.
Yeah, so I would just feel until the good stuff comes in, Don, in the chat. So I think it's two things. I think that there is the perennial problem in learning and development, that we find it difficult to communicate the value of what we do in a way that really hits home with our stakeholders, something that then we would see increases our credibility, our value, our budgets, and general good feeling about L&D. And the other side is we're worried that our leadership is asking whether AI could do parts of our job, if not all of it, better than or as good as learning and development is. And so the gap in us feeling insecure and anxious about our roles has got to be in showing something that is valuable. That's my thought, Don. That this is an opinionated view. Sometimes I know that you try to let the data talk, or not try to assume too much. But I'd love to know your thoughts too, Don.
Well, I'm going to just reflect on what the audience is saying very quickly. Grantley saying the numbers don't seem hugely significant. We're talking about the percentages of things being shared. And yeah, you're absolutely right, Grantley, actually, that one number from 1 year's votes is not significant. But when you look at trends over time and you've got several thousand people expressing their opinion each year, then it does become significant. Yeah, 6 to 7%, does it matter? It does matter when something has changed, when a line crosses, when something goes in a different direction. So for me, that's what I'm looking at here. And certainly when I'm asking this question, why is value important? It's provoking a response from people, typically, that shows me that it is significant. I guess Paul says it's just, no, sorry, that was something else. Christopher jumps in with 1 million layoffs blamed on AI. Dan says the same thing, threat to our role. And I think there's a lot in that. Fear of being replaced by AI, says Marzia. Role of AI, Becky says, declining with the inability to align to the business. So essentially, David, what we're getting here is a lot of people chipping in, and this is my feeling as well, that the increased sense that value is important aligns with the sense that, well, I've got to be looking after my job. And showing that but also Carsten says, showing we're able to use AI in a way that it creates more value. And that's an alternative way of looking at this, which is, well, look, we can do this now in a way we couldn't do it before. So it looks to me like we should be showing value, or showing value is important because we can do it now. So there's a wide range of answers here, but I think typically we've got quite a lot of people focusing on the idea of job insecurity here. Even Dolores says, I'm relatively new to the field. I've noticed a bigger focus on L&D, understanding what business values are. I'm going to introduce you to the Learning Technologies schedule from 2003. That's the third one that I shared. And, what do we have on day 2? Measuring training, track 2, session 5. Show me the return on investment is a consistent demand that executives make of their training department. So it's nothing new about this. This is something that's been with us for a long time. We haven't cracked it, but it seems more important now because of AI. That's what I'm hearing. I'm going to move on. I mean, we could talk about this for an entire hour, but I'm going to move on because I want to get onto my second question, which is about reskilling and upskilling. So stay with us as we try to get behind that table that just shows you the bald results. Second point was, we're interested in value. All right. The third point for me is that skills are remaining hot here. So reskilling and upskilling first came onto the table of options 6 years ago. It was then number 1 for 3 years. Then it was number 2 for 3 years, with AI being number 1. So it's been number 1 or number 2 for 6 years, which is unprecedented. And it's only there because AI pushed it off the top rank. And skills-based talent management is number 4. Also very interesting that number 2, reskilling, upskilling, has come up from last year. So clearly people are saying this is important. But I just want to get behind these words. We hear an awful lot about reskilling and upskilling. I just want to look into the history of where these words have come from. It's not new. If we look at the dates on these things here, we can see 2021. Skills are the new currency of the world of work. Skills, not jobs, are the currency of work. And bottom left-hand corner, forget Bitcoin. Skills are the currency of the future, right? All this is from like 5, 6 years ago, all right? Nothing new there. What happened? Well, here's what happened. Reskilling and upskilling was not a thing, according to Google Trends, until some point in 2019 when people started talking about it. And if you go back, you can actually see peaks on the graph of people searching for information about reskilling and upskilling that correspond with particular events. And in particular, you've got the Upskilling Adult Conference in the EU in June of 2019, but the key 2020 report from the World Economic Forum adding to it. We seem to be frozen again. Is that, yeah, David? I think I might have cut there, but I'm back. Okay. Yeah. After the 2020 report comes out, everyone jumps on the bandwagon. What happens? Have a look at it. Okay, I'm back now. Could you give me a thumbs up, David? I'm back, yeah?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, okay. I do apologize for this. I have, for the past 20 years, I've had 2 internet connections at home in order to be able to do webinars without an interruption. This is quite unusual. You can see on the left-hand side here, I've got a timeline of people talking about reskilling and upskilling. On the left-hand side, 2019, this is the first mention of it that's significant from IDC. 2019, June, we're actually talking about reskilling, upskilling in the wake of AI. That's before ChatGPT. But basically, on the left-hand side here, we've got people talking about reskilling and upskilling to meet the needs, the talent needs of the organization. June 2020, February 2021, suddenly we're talking about reskilling to deal with COVID and the pandemic. It's the same solution, it's a completely different driver. And if you look at it now, you'll see that people are talking about reskilling and upskilling because of AI. We need, now, I'm not saying any of this is wrong. I am saying it's a bit peculiar that we seem to have this phrase and this solution, which is in search of a problem. Firstly, it's talent and AI, then it's COVID, now it's AI again. I would love to know, everybody, what your thoughts on this are. And by the way, it's not just the general population that is doing this business of jumping on the bandwagon. It's not just big consultancies doing this. If we look at the general votes for reskilling, upskilling, you can see it's been pretty flat. It actually bounced up this year slightly. I added it to the survey in 2021. You can see there it's slowly declined. Here are the votes for reskilling and upskilling in Sweden. Well, look, for the last 3 years, it's kind of tracked the world underneath it. Fine. What on earth happened in 2022? Why was everybody madly keen on reskilling, upskilling? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because Per Lager brought out a book called Upskill och Reskill, right? There you go. That's the book in English. In autumn, August of 2022, he brought the book out just before the survey was launched. Suddenly it was in everybody's minds. Now, if that's what can happen in one isolated incident, we see it, how much are we saying that reskilling and upskilling is important just because everybody's saying that reskilling and upskilling is important? I'm not saying it's not important, but I would love to get your ideas on this. David, I know you've got ideas, so please let us know. Are these just buzzwords? Is it actually happening? Is it just our job anyway? Please let us know what your thoughts are on reskilling and upskilling. Oh, Paul, I'm going to come back to your question about technology causing disruption if I can later on. David, are you live or frozen?
I am.
I can see your eyes moving.
No, I am live. And I'm intrigued. I mean, Don, I'm in the chat. This is where I am. If you can't find me, because I'm in the chat.
Becky is hoping to cause a blip herself next year. Change in business is perpetual, says Kristen. I like this. So reskill, upskill is also perpetually important. But Kristen, that's a really, really good way of expressing it. Yeah, actually, it's kind of our job, isn't it? Don't we always have to be doing that? So it should be perpetually important. The question, of course, is what will be hot next year? I think it's interesting that something that's a perennially important thing has seemed to be so important. David, come on, tell us about reskilling, upskilling. Is it just a buzzword or is it something that's actually seriously important?
Well, Don, I think that you can make a story within the top 5 there about this, because how come we want to show our value and yet our priority is upskilling, reskilling? Aren't we able to show our value because we have upskilled and reskilled? Or is the problem that we don't know how to upskill and reskill? For a profession that is about, well, we're in the business of skills. I think that's the challenge. But I suppose, so here's a question that I'd love to throw out there on when your graph that said that Google activity spiked around those times. I'd love to know when competency spiked, behaviors spiked, and competencies spiked when those were buzzwords. But why I think this one is landing, and I had a conversation on the podcast with someone about this. They said when you talk about skills inside your organization, no education is required because it's a currency that's valued by leadership. It's a currency that is valued by the workforce. And now in learning and development, we're there going, well, that's on us. Surely that's on us. But I wonder whether we own as much of that as we should. And maybe that's why it's a hot topic.
I think there is a tremendous amount of talk around reskilling, and it is a serious issue and it's important. But there's a tremendous amount of talk about it precisely because, as you say, you don't need to actually know very much to talk about reskilling and upskilling. And I think in particular, there's a danger that people who are at the top of organizations are saying, oh, we need skills, because it sounds a little bit like people are the machines in an organization that need to be topped up with skills, a bit like ERP, a bit like supply chain management. We just get enough skills put into these people and they'll work properly. I'm not saying they're not important, but people are more complicated than that. Learning is more complicated than that. And machines don't have off days, and machines don't get up and leave when they're not looked after properly. So I think that there's a real danger that leadership in organizations are underestimating the complexity of people and the complexity of skills when they talk about reskilling, upskilling. But it is so popular and has been for so long that, a bit like when a book comes out and it triggers us to write about it, I think that's what's happening. I think when the buzz around it is not going away. Okay, there's a lot of chat about it here, which is really helpful. And that's why in the moment learning is so important, says Angelica. Look, I love this. If I hadn't been so awful with my internet connection, I would be spending more time dwelling on everybody's thoughts here, which they are great. Andrew's adding, yeah, I could be cynical. No, surely not. I could be cynical and wonder whether Reskill Upskill is simply a vendor rebrand. I don't think it's just a vendor thing, Andrew, but I do think it's a popular buzz phrase that's bandied around without sufficient thinking about it. I still think it's important, but I think we need to take ownership of it in a way that currently it's something that's easily ill-defined and therefore sounds important, if that makes sense. I'm going to press on. I want to talk about that question I asked about challenges, because I really want to get people's take on this business of being positive and negative about change. Thank you very much, everybody, for your thoughts so far. All these photographs are taken on my travels, and this is from Devon somewhere. And I thought, if you've got a photograph of somebody saying it's a slippery slope, you've got to take a photograph of it. The slippery slope is where the dangers appear. And I asked everybody this year, as I always do, what's your biggest challenge for the year ahead? And 41,000 words were written in response, which is the same length as a book, in this case, Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. And what is interesting is that each year, the number of words that's been written has increased. But in particular, up to the launch of ChatGPT, 40% of people answered this question. After the launch of ChatGPT, it was 95%, 85%. This year, back to 95%. There's a lot more people sharing their challenges, and they're writing a lot more about it each time. So I'm not trivializing the fact that each of these words, each of these comments is somebody sharing something that they see as being reflecting something difficult, I think, in their lives. There is positive stuff as well in the survey, by all means. But when we look at the word pressure, and I count words because it's easy to have confirmation bias, but when you're counting words, you know, is that occurring more or less? The word pressure occurred a lot as we came out of COVID. It dropped down, and then it's risen for the past 2 years, particularly on the back of AI. Now, there are other words you can look at, stress. You can look at other words around this, like, I don't know, demand. But pressure is a word that's been used by respondents, particularly to apply to pressure on them, whereas the other words, overwork and stress, are used to apply to employees as well as themselves. Pressure is almost exclusively used to say, I'm under pressure. And it's not a good position to be in. I think there's a real problem with overwork. And when I look at the 5 trends across these 41,000 words, some of these, I think, are always going to be a problem for L&D. So 2, 3, and 4 here, demonstrating value, budget, and getting people to turn up for training and then getting them to use the training. Yep, those are always going to be problems. But number 1 and number 5 here, adopting this particular technology and integrating it, AI, yep, that's hot now and it's going to be hot for a while. And the other one is fundamental, and this is something I don't remember being fundamental before AI came out. I don't remember us having such serious conversations about it. Change, uncertainty, and our role. I want to look at some of the quotes around this, and I want to draw your attention to the group of quotes in the middle here, which are around change, uncertainty, and L&D's role. And there are 2 quotes in there which for me illustrate 2 sides of the coin that people are seeing with the changes going on. Let me just blow those up for you. Moving from being a training provider to being a performance partner. That's a positive view. I've got an opportunity here. I want to have more of an impact. The other view, I've got to show I'm providing value to avoid redundancy. Now, I'm not making these up. These are not even précis or summaries of existing quotes. These are real quotes from 2 of the 3,700 people who responded to the survey. And my question to you is, of those 2, what do you think is the realistic view of learning development in the coming year? Is it, yeah, we can make the move? Is it, I've got to show what I can do, or I don't have a job? Not trying to be negative here, and I'm hoping we're going to get to the point of lifting ourselves out of this into a positive view of the world, but let me know in the chat, either put A or B, or just say, now Christopher has said, there's a lot of words being added because AI wrote it. Christopher, I thought that might be the case. I've drilled down, I have looked for the telltale signs, Christopher, of AI writing, and I can't find any. So I'm not saying it's not happening. People might be masking it, but I don't think it is. Now look, David, what I'm getting here is people being pretty positive here. Dolores is saying, look, it depends on the organization. That's a fair answer. Oh, I love Dolores' answer. If the leaders believe in L&D, then A. But if they don't, then B. Dolores, what you've got there is the beginning of a 2x2 grid, which, as we know, is the foundation of any consultancy offering. So I think you are onto a winner there. Oh, Becky. Becky, that's a very, very good one. A is what you've got to say to the business. B is the reality for L&D people. Oh, I tell you what, this is like, each of these answers is like a little haiku. It's like a little poem, a little epitaph that illustrates the essence of this problem. This is just amazing. Yeah. And Victoria's saying, come on. I think it's a lot more B going on than we like to admit. Look, I'm liking the positivity. David, what's your view on this one? Which one do you think it is?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm an optimist. I think the long and the short of it, Donald, is L&D's not going away. Now, the B element is that not every L&D department will remain in the same shape. And I know that both you and I have spoken to the good folks at Blue Eskimo very recently, the L&D recruitment firm, and they've confirmed that the L&D roles and teams are morphing as we speak. But I think in terms of survival, then what's required is that pivot at the top. But it was the comment that was made in there. If leadership believes in it now, as somebody writing a book on the topic, Don, I know that leadership aren't going to just believe that there is a critical role for reframing or restating the value of learning and development as it should be. In the language, as Becky said, in the language that they value. But if we remain talking about the value of learning, I think we just reinforce our position as the training provider, and it's just that remains conveniently the same.
I think Paul has also expressed it very well. I think you've done that well. I think Paul's expressed it really well here as well, which is, look, we've got 1 and 5, those answers are part of the same coin, and L&D has to move to being a performance partner to demonstrate value, or we find ourselves redundant. So I think that's a great way of expressing it. Also, Dolores seems to be handing out cookies, which is very nice of her. Thank you very much, Dolores. Are these virtual or are they real? If they are real, I'll give you my address. You can send one through the post. Right, so we've got to the point, and I've been rushing a bit through here because of all those horrible connection problems earlier. I want to try to get to the point where I'm just talking briefly about what I see as being not just see, but what research that Egla, Vinauskaita and I are conducting seems to show is how organizations are changing to shift to a new way of operating to provide themselves with a different, what we're calling operating logic. So, Becky's cookies are coming from Texas. I'd like to introduce you to the idea of how organizations are transforming. Now, this is something that Egla and I brought up first in this report here, which is a 60-page report, AI in L&D, and we looked at, there's like 20 pages of case studies in this. We look at how people are actually working with AI at the moment in L&D. And we found that AI is precipitating, AI is causing a change in how learning and development operates. And it's doing this because content-focused learning and development, which is where we've been in the past, is no longer, I was going to say an easy, but it's no longer actually a viable place to be in the long term. The problem is that it is possible now to create content extremely quickly of a good enough quality using AI, using generative AI. You can do lots of other things with AI, but the content piece is the key bit here. You can create stuff that's often good enough. The point about quality is less important than the fact that it is incredibly cheaper to do it. So if you produce something that's no good, you scrap it, you try to do something a bit better. So the content focus of L&D, which used to be what we did when I started as a classroom trainer in the 1980s, when I was designing online courses in the 1990s, that's what we did. But now it is far cheaper to do that robotically. It may not be as good, but it may be half as good, but 95% cheaper. Given that equation, the financial people in an organization know exactly where they're going to put their money. Content-focused L&D is no longer viable for L&D, but there are so many other things that we can do with it. So what I want to introduce you to is 3 things that it's possible to do with AI for L&D. And it's not just that you can do it with AI, it's just that these are ways of operating as L&D that do not focus on content, but provide a richer engagement with the organization. I'm going to go through this quite quickly. If you link in with me, I'll send you a copy of the report, a link to it, so you can look at it in more detail. And there's a new report coming out in May, which will drill down on this in about, it's going to be about 40 pages long, so it's quite a lot of work. One thing we found is that some organizations are focusing on skills. This doesn't just mean having a competency framework. It means having somebody in the organization who absolutely understands skills and is able to share the information around skills, what it takes, where you need to be, where you are now, how to get from here to there, and treat skills not as an add-on, but as a fundamental business resource. That's crucial. So they're listening all the time to the signals coming from the organization about what skills do we need, where are we, and is constantly working with managers to ensure that people have the skills they need to do their jobs. That's a very quick summary of that. And we have organizations that are doing that right now, typically in office work and knowledge work. Another way of getting away from content focus is enablement partner. Now, skills authority requires content, but it's not the operating logic for the skills authority. An enablement partner also deals with content, but it's not why it's there. An enablement partner, and a good example would be a hotel chain that looks across the organization. It's very widely distributed. There is knowledge, there's expertise that's scattered around. It sets itself up in order to identify good practice and provide people with the tools to capture the good practice and share it across the organization. That's a very simple example, but the role of L&D is not to be a bottleneck, but to be an enabler, to give people the tools and the ability to do this well and to identify what the good practice is and to support it. When I describe it that way, you'll know that there's other things that have to happen in these organizations. The culture has to be right. There has to be psychological safety, as well as the tools, as well as the L&D department driving this from the center. And yes, content's important, but it's not why these people are going to work. They're going to work to share great practice to boost performance. And the final one of these is adaptation engine. Here, the L&D department doesn't really exist at all. It's spread around and it's become part of the operational practice in the organization. It may be that there's learning and development as part of a sort of hit squad of people that go out and tackle particular issues with performance. And one example we had was an organization that found very high turnover of staff in one part of the organization. How could they deal with it? It wasn't a matter of going in and training those people. It wasn't a matter of going in and training their managers. It was a matter of going in and seeing why were people leaving the organization. It turned out that they had what's called a bad EVP, employee value proposition. They thought they were getting one thing when they signed up, they got something else. a combination of new recruiting practices, new training and onboarding, and other things as well, meant that the employee value proposition shifted and the performance lifted and the turnover dropped. It wasn't an L&D solution. But what was important was that there, people were listening to the performance issues in the organization and were ready to take action with the right combination of approaches. Same with the enablement partner, listening to what's happening in the organization, finding the good stuff and sharing. Skills authority, listening to what's happening with the managers and what they're saying about skills. In all of these cases, accepting what we call the signals that are coming out of the business and acting with them. That's a very quick summary of this. What I want to suggest here is that AI enables us, and all of these things are enabled by AI, but it doesn't start with AI. It starts with the right culture and the business problem. What I want to suggest is that there are ways of L&D taking a much more strategic and performance-focused role than it has in the past. And it can do that by shifting away from content. And by the way, it has to shift away from content because that is not the exclusive, unique determiner of value that it used to be for L&D. It's become something that quite rapidly is being commoditized. That's my 5-minute boiled down précis of what the transformation triangle is coming out. What it means, as I say, the report's coming out in May, and there'll be a lot more coming into that. But David, I could see you nodding. I could hear you typing frantically while that was going on. Obviously, there's a bit of chat going on. Is there anything you want to share before we get into some Q&A?
Yeah, no, I think that the Q&A is the important part. I would say I'd encourage anybody who has questions that there's so much there to digest. It's just the comments, Don. You know, Victoria's come in and said that having a human in the loop to diagnose the problem is key. You know, that you know, what I think that highlights is that if you don't understand the problem, then I don't think we really move forward, and it's just a content focused approach. But what you've highlighted there are getting closer to the business, whether it's from skills, from listening, or embedding in a completely different way that reinforces that. And Dolores had said we basically moved all our e-learning content to feed a Q&A agent based on what our leaders wanted. So not over-identifying with an existing learning and development identity, but almost throwing it out and thinking very end-user centric in order to actually solve the problems. And interestingly, Christopher had said here, I'm trying to find examples of people actually showing how they use AI other than that, not an ad for software or report on the outcomes, like how they actually utilize the AI with the demos and stuff. So look, there's loads going on here. But
Kelly's put in a link to Philippa Hardman. I would totally follow Philippa Hardman because she's doing really good work here. And if there's nobody like her for real pedagogical soundness combined with AI and designing content. So I totally would jump in and follow that link from Kelly. Shall we jump onto some Q&A?
Let's do that. Yeah. So Victoria's got a question here, and so it's very much survey based. So is there any countries, locations, or types of roles you wish you would have had more responses from? And did any responses from any locations surprise you?
Yes. Africa, we haven't got enough coverage in Africa. And there are simple reasons for this, which is that if you want to go and get people to vote for you, you have to have either a physical presence there. I do a lot of traveling in the world just to show my face around, and you have to have a partner that people trust locally. So we're building a good presence in South America, building a good presence in Southeast Asia, getting there in the Middle East. Africa is the future of the world in terms of people. That's where all the young people are. I don't have enough coverage there, and it kills me. I'm going to get at least 2, hopefully 3 African countries to vote in significant numbers for next year. Thank you for raising that very important point. In terms of surprises, yes, I was talking this morning to Southeast Asia. Everyone's putting AI as number 1, but Cambodia, for some reason, is at 16%. Everyone else is at 20% plus, mostly 24%. Why has Cambodia got a down on AI? I don't know. Surprised me. We'll see if it continues next year.
Brilliant. And then we've got a couple of questions on Well, Analia has had a question, the first question for a long time, how to work with the lack of attention from our audience on live learning sessions. Erica also asked, in terms of duration, how short is too short for live learning, in particular virtual sessions?
These are very specific questions. Andrew Jacobs is here. I would love Andrew Jacobs' view on how short is too short for a virtual session. I would always say, and this is a horrible answer to give on that one, it depends. What I mean is that I will happily watch a movie that's 2 hours long if it's well produced and it pulls me in. I get enormously frustrated by a podcast where people are umming and ahhing at the beginning, and I within 5 minutes I'm off. So the production has to be tight, and I don't think there is a particular answer on duration. I think there is an answer in terms of quality. Classic example, actually, the In Our Time podcast, or radio programs it used to be, hosted by Melvin Bragg. I love it. He starts in a snappy way. Everything keeps moving. The new host, whose name I can't remember, is much slower. And frankly, I can't listen to it. There's just not enough zip there. So I think it's a matter of keeping people engaged through production values and quality content. But the first part of the question was, how do we get people to turn up to live events? Is that right? Online or face-to-face?
Yeah, so that was keep them engaged. So how to work with the lack of attention from our audience on live learning sessions.
Okay, so this is an absolutely common theme of the challenges that are represented in that global sentiment survey. And it's that one about learner attention and application. And the answer here is there's a balance between quality of content and utility of content. If it's useful, people will turn up and they'll do the course and the training because it helps them. If it's really, really high quality Hollywood production, yeah, they'll probably stick around because they're drawn into it. You probably can't afford that. Somewhere in the middle, there's good enough quality, which is where you need to dial it back, but absolutely on point for providing people with value. And for me, if people aren't sticking around, it's probably because we're not providing enough value for them. And for me, the answer to that isn't around production quality or pedagogical methods. It's around talking to managers to understand what is it that these people really are trying to solve in their daily jobs. If we're not answering that question, then we're not getting anywhere near people wanting to stay in the training. That's a straightforward answer. Sorry if it's a bit blunt.
No, and Don, if I can ask you one quick, this is a quick fire question. Becky's asked, Donald, how would you rename us to fit the triangle? I take it the department. How would you rename us? I take it Becky means the learning and development profession to fit the triangle.
I did a post on this some time ago, about 3 or 4 months ago, I think. I suggested people and capability. I'm kind of moving away from that now to performance and capability, by which I mean performance typically in the short term, capability, yes, now, but also in the longer term. That has always been what learning and development has done, but we've seen learning as being the route towards building performance and capability. For me, I think learning is only one way now in a vast array of things that include coaching, skills practice, mentoring, provision of job aids, and a whole bunch of other things that get us to supporting short-term performance and long-term capability. P&C, that's what I'm calling it. But I tell you what, I don't really care what it's called, just as long as we're building networks in the business and getting influence. Every successful L&D project I've seen has that common factor. The people at the charge of it are leaders who are entrepreneurial, they're pretty sassy, and they build networks because they know that ultimately power in organizations resides in the people.
Exactly. Don, that was a hugely enlightening session. Thanks for sharing, lifting the lid on the survey and sharing your insights with us. Thank you everybody for joining in. It's been a very lively chat, and we've hugely enjoyed your contribution. We couldn't have made this as interesting and as dynamic as it has been without your contribution. So we really do appreciate that. Special shout out to Andrew Jacobs, who I also lent on for a question earlier. Andrew, the check will be in the post.
But also we're hoping the cookies in the post. Come on, let's not forget Dolores and her cookies.
Of course, Dolores and the cookies as well. We look forward to those. But please do download the Global Sentiment Survey report. There's so much more in there than we've talked about, and so much more than just the headlines as well. But thank you very much for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.